Welcome to the Story Partners Podcast. I'm Annie Manus, and we're so glad you found us.
Every one of us has an imperfect father, an imperfect mother. There's no perfect parenting. We all are wounded, and our life is recovering from those childhood wounds. But what we use to fix those wounds is often what the world sees as success. I had the fancy suits, I had the beautiful woman, I had all the money I needed, and I was empty.
In the eyes of the world, Daniel Mueller literally had it all. By most measures of success, Daniel was nailing it. But in his own words, he was empty. The actor Jim Carrey once said, "I hope everybody could get rich and famous and will have everything they ever dreamed of, so that they will know it is not the answer." Listen in as Daniel recounts his personal journey through the world of success in an effort to prove himself worthy. This is Season 2, Episode 4, Nothing to Prove.
I'm Daniel Mueller. I was the first of three and had two other siblings who were older. So she was the youngest of three sisters. And her mom was a very regimented mom that would go into fits of rage and go into epileptic seizures, probably, we don't know. But she would just absolutely go crazy. So Mom was raised in that kind of environment. She did not know anything about boys. I came out of the womb, and I was immediately that absolutely incorrigible child. So Mom would say, "Do not go past this point." And it started in the crib. And I immediately got out of the crib. At 1.5 years old, I was climbing out of the crib and down that. I mean, it was a huge drop. It was like the Grand Canyon to get down to the base. It took a lot of climbing, a lot of gymnastics, and I got out. And she started pulling her hair out at 1.5, and it didn't stop. It never stopped. So Mom would set a boundary, I would go past that boundary. Because it must be interesting past that. There must be a reason why I shouldn't go past that point. So I always did. And that's the story of my life. Well, it was a traumatic childhood because Mom became an abusive parent. So Mom knew one thing, and that was abuse, emotional and physical abuse. So she translated that abuse to me. So she would hit me, she would scream at me, she would chase me, and it was followed by a lot of love, a lot of tenderness, a lot of remorse on her part that she did what she did, but she just didn't know. She didn't know how to raise a boy. And my dad would always come home from work and say, "Well, he's just a boy." And she had no idea. Her idea of raising a child was total, complete compliance to her rules. My idea was the opposite. So we butted heads. Dad was passive, and Dad was the follower in the family. So Mom ruled the roost, and Dad was the submissive, quiet, anything you want, dear kind of husband. And so I had some issues with Dad, in the sense that I wanted protection from Mom, and Dad would be torn between us. Two very strong personalities, me and Mom, and Dad would be caught in the middle. Mom and Dad were very religious, so Catholicism. That meant church every Sunday without fail. And I got very involved in the Catholic Church. So I was an altar boy, and I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to walk in the snow or the sleet or the rain in New Jersey down to the church so I could put on my altar boy clothes and serve at a 6 a.m. Mass. And I did that many, many mornings. I got to a point where I was a lectern and I was reading out of the Bible. But I didn't realize I was reading out of the Bible, but I was reading Paul's first letter to somebody, the Corinthians or whatever. I had no idea that it was actually the Bible. I thought it was like the catechism. I understood that there were three places to go: heaven, purgatory, or hell. And I did not want to go to hell. And I realized that I was a sinner, because that was what was taught in the Catholic Church, and that I needed indulgences. I needed to get out of purgatory, so I would pray. And I would keep track. So as a little boy, I had this list, because you got 7 indulgences, I believe, for saying the Our Father. You got 5 for saying Hail Mary, and Glory be to the Father, you got 3 or 2, I forget. So anyway, I would keep track of all that. And I had thousands of years built up so I could get out of purgatory and go to heaven. We lived in New Jersey on the Palisades overlooking Manhattan. I went to Catholic grade school, and then I went to this all-boys Catholic college preparatory school called Power Memorial Academy, Irish Christian Brother run. I ended up being kind of the odd guy out a lot. You know, there's the popular guys and there's the smart guys, and I was somewhere in between. I wanted to be with the popular guys, but God has given me some intelligence, so I had more in common with the smart guys, but the smart guys were seen as nerds, and so I just didn't fit. I was involved in music. I played in a band, and I fell in with a bunch of people that were smoking pot. So I fit in by smoking and drinking with the kids because I was uncomfortable in my own skin. And it made me comfortable. And I fit in. And so I'm 15, 16 years old, and I'm smoking a copious amount of marijuana. And so it got to a point where I needed help. And so I went to my parents and said, I've got a problem. And so they got me the psychiatrist to see, Nick Marchese. And he helped me get off of marijuana. And I'll never forget Nick sitting back in his chair saying, "Daniel, don't you want to be somebody? Don't you want to climb that ladder to success?" I said, "Yeah, Nick, I do." And so that idea of medical school was born because I researched around. I'm a researcher. And I researched doctors make more money than anyone. Money was a measure of success. So coming from a poor family, if you had money, you were successful. And that was my equation at the time. So I wanted to have a lot of money, and I wanted to make the most possible. And it seemed like becoming a doctor was the way to do that. I went to University of New York at Stony Brook, Long Island, for college. And during that time, I was pre-med, and during that time, the ratio of people applying to people being accepted into medical school was 53 to 1. So 53 applicants for every 1 acceptance. And I really wanted to get into med school. So I researched around the country because I had a 3.7 GPA and the average was 3.75 to get into med school, and I needed state tuition because I come from a poor family. And so I found out that Texas had a 2-to-1 ratio. So I said, for sure, I'm going to get into medical school in Texas. So I relocated. Now, Dad worked for the railroad, and so he had a railroad pass. So I was able to get on the train and 2-day trip on the train to Texas, and I checked it out. I came to Austin. My grand plan was I was going to go to the UT Health Science Center in San Antonio to med school. I was going to finish up my undergrad at UT Austin, and then the next thing I know, I'm in a biology class, and there's 300 kids in that class, the smartest 300 kids in Texas, and they're grading on a curve. And at that time, marijuana was part of my life, and I had burned out too many brain cells to memorize. I used to have a photographic memory, but I just couldn't memorize. Organic chemistry killed me, memorizing all those formulas. And then when I talked to medical students and doctors, I found out that you weren't going to use any of that in actually practicing medicine, and I just lost interest. I worked my way through college as a personal trainer and fitness coach, and I really felt I found my passion, helping people to change. So they would come in obese and they would leave in really good condition, and it was very, very enjoyable. The fatal mistake was not getting career counseling, and so I took everything and anything. And then I went to a guidance counselor and said, hey, what can I do with all these credits? And they said, well, nothing. And I needed 2 years of Texas history and 2 years of Spanish in order to graduate. And my daughter came along, and I said, well, that's it. My 7 years are up. And I dropped out. My daughter was born, and I instantly realized that kids come out of the womb craving more than just hamburgers. And I needed to get serious about work. And then I got discovered. So this guy, Neil Johnson, hired me to be his one of the personal trainers in his fitness center. And then he said, you know, you have talent and you need to be in sales. So he put me in sales. And at the same time he put me in sales, he also started opening up this thing called the Bible and sharing the gospel with me. So he's sharing the gospel with me and helping me, but he also physically helped me. So he physically helped me. My car broke down, he loaned me his car. And he did a lot of things like that that told me that he really cared about me. And he said, God really cares about you, and God has a plan for your life. I didn't quite know what that meant, but I knew that he was a good man, and he cared about me, and he put me in sales. And that year, I went from making $20,000 a year as a personal trainer and fitness coach working in his fitness center to making over $100,000 a year as a salesperson selling memberships to the health club. I just progressed in that way. I left his fitness center. I went to the Hills Medical Sports Complex, which was kind of like the Kenneth Cooper in Dallas, a kind of a holistic center and helping people on exercise programs. And I'll never forget, they sat me down and said, Daniel, you're making too much money. And I said, well, that's our deal. They said, well, you don't understand. We're going to have to change your compensation schedule. And I said, no, that's not going to happen. And they said, yes, it is. And I said, no, it's not. And they said, okay, you're fired. So here I am raising my daughter. And by then, my daughter's mother had abandoned me and her. So she disappeared. And I was 24/7 mom and dad to this 2-year-old. So I needed to get serious. So I hung out a shingle and I became a consultant. And so I started teaching sales. And what I learned is I had a knack for teaching adults. And so I taught sales, then I started teaching management. I became a platform speaker and trainer, and then I became CEO of a management consulting firm. And I just fell into all this. So I just evolved. I found I had a gift for serving and serving clients in whatever scope of work we had. So I got accolades for the training work, the platform work. In fact, in my mind, I was going to be the next Tony Robbins. I was an author, CEO, consultant. I put a lot of energy into that image. That meant I had the best clothes, I had the best cars, I lived in the best places, so everything was for external appearances. On the exterior, I was confident, but inside, I was a scared little kid from Jersey who didn't have a college degree, and if you knew and you found out, you would never hire me. I definitely felt like a fraud. There was a deep, deep sense of I'm an imposter. And at night, I was a lonely single parent, 24/7, and I would get a 6-pack of beer, and I would open one up, and every half hour until that beer was gone, and then I could calm down, numb the pain of the loneliness, numb the pain of the disconnect between what the world saw and what I felt. My father had come down from New Jersey to visit his granddaughter and me. She was 3 months old. And I had spent the whole week of his visit showing off. I've got this, I've got that, I'm doing this, look at me. And he spoke into my life. And he said, Daniel, I'm real proud of you. You've got all this going on. But there's one thing missing. I want you to go back to your faith in God. And I promised I would. The next day, he got on a plane from Austin to New Jersey. My mom said it was the best day of her life. It was their anniversary. They celebrated. The next day, December 23rd, he died. But I had made that vow to him. Dad, I'll go back to my faith. The mother of my daughter showed up and took my daughter, disappeared into the night with my daughter. And that broke me. I cried myself to sleep, and then I woke up in the morning, and back then we had the yellow pages, and so I opened the yellow pages and I just started dialing for Jesus. And I just called and called and called all these churches. And there was this one church, Southwest Christian Church, and this associate pastor, Pastor Phil Landrum. And he answered the phone. It was 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning, and he happened to be in the office. And I said, I want to receive Jesus. Can you help me? Every pastor's dream, probably. And so he jumped on his motorcycle and drove to my house. And I'll never forget, he showed up. He had on a black leather jacket, a black helmet, black gloves, black motorcycle. He looked like Darth Vader. And he got off the bike, and I was scared because I'm a sinner, right? And he takes off his helmet, and the most beautiful blue eyes I have ever seen. It was the eyes of Jesus. And Phil came into my house, and he shared that God has a plan for my life, that I'm a sinner and I'm incapable of saving myself, that Jesus died for my sins, and that if I would surrender to him, he would come in, with his Holy Spirit, he would forgive me of my sins if I repented, and then he would give me this brand new life. And I did that at that point in time in 1982. Miraculously, during the time that I was receiving Christ, the phone rang, and the mother of my daughter came back and brought my daughter back. She did not really want any part of Christ or any part of really being a mother. So I continued to raise my daughter until the age of 13. I accepted Christ into my life in 1982, and then I immediately joined this church. I understood that now I was under this New Testament, and I was under grace, I was under forgiveness, I was under the protocol of the gospel. However, there was a disconnect. There was a disconnect between all that I was doing on Sundays and what I was doing during the week. I ran my business different than I interfaced at church. So I didn't quite understand what it meant to follow Jesus. I didn't want to give God control. He could be a part of my life. He could save me. He could give me the freedom from hell. But I didn't want him to be my father. I wanted control. I've got to close this deal. I've got to sell this course. I've got to sell this account, close this client. So I had, but there was a little ever-ready bunny, you know, the ever-ready bunny that beats more, 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 better, 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 faster, faster, faster. You know, I was trying to fill this God-shaped vacuum with something. It was 1988, and I had an event. I filled up a ballroom with 300 people, all coming and paying $100 to see me. $30,000. That was a lot of money back then. And how I prepared the night before, I got drunk. And that day was just all the success. In fact, there was a woman in the first row that was attracted to me. I ended up dating her, and she was absolutely gorgeous. So I had the most beautiful woman that I was dating. I had the pinnacle of my career, this filled ballroom. I was making huge amounts of money. I had press. I had newspapers writing articles, and I had all kinds of accolades. And I was empty. There's got to be something more. What's more? Why am I not fulfilled? Why am I not happy? Why am I not at peace? So there was a surrender back in '82 where I said, Christ, you can be my Savior. But there's a difference for me of saying, okay, you can save me, but can you be my Lord? Can you really run my life? And I don't think I ever really fully surrendered to lordship. I didn't understand what was happening to me. I do now. You know, there's two types of bottoms. There's rock bottom, which I hit years later, but I had hit rock top. Rock top is an interesting phenomenon where you have everything. You have all the money or whatever you value. You have all the success or perceived success. You have all the accolades. You have the reputation. You have, and you have not. And I had not. It didn't fulfill me. And I didn't know what was wrong, but I did know that I was a little hamster in a wheel. More, 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 better, 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 faster, faster, faster. So I just did more of it, trying to get back that feeling of that day when 300 people are applauding and cheering, and it never came. I'm reading this book and it says your work matters to God. Work is ministry. So I learn, okay, there's an integration between my faith and my work. And then I meet this man, A.C. Johnson, founder of Biblical Leadership for Excellence, and he discipled me and mentored me and helped me to understand it's much more than just witnessing at work. Workplace ministry is really how we live our lives at work. So I started that journey of integrating my faith with my work and my behavior with my faith. But there was still one big disconnect, and that was alcohol and drugs. So I struggled with it. I could stop for a while. In fact, I stopped for 2.5 years. From 1987 to 1989 and a half or so. And I was engaged to a neat Christian woman, Diane. We were going to be married. And then Russell Kelfer of Wayside Chapel in San Antonio, Texas, where I was, he was like Diane's father. She didn't have one, and he was kind of that surrogate father. And he met with me before we were going to get married, and he spoke to me and spoke into my life and said, well, Daniel, you are one of the most arrogant young men I have ever met in my life, and you're not ready to marry Diane. I said, what? No way. So I talked to Diane, and she says, well, he says you're not ready, so we're calling off the wedding. And we were right at the stage of sending out the wedding invitations. And I had a perfect mother to my 5-year-old daughter at the time, and it was just, my whole world cratered. And I remember we broke up over that because Daniel wanted his way, right? Daniel wanted, well, we have to go through with it. We started this process, we're getting married. And she wanted to slow down, and I wanted to speed up, which is the story of my life. So we broke up, and I did the next right thing that I knew to do. I started drinking again, and then I started smoking marijuana again, and next thing I know, I'm back to the old behaviors of pot and alcohol. Those are my 2 drugs of choice. It was very difficult being a single parent, raising a daughter 24/7. I would work all day. I would stop to pick her up from daycare, stop at the convenience store to pick up a 6-pack of beer, go home, put her to bed at 8:30, and drink 1 beer every half hour for the next numbers of hours, watching TV and numbing out, and just lonely, tired, and no one home. So I had no idea that I was an alcoholic. I just thought that I was taking care of my pain and solving that disconnect between who I was on the outside and what I felt on the inside by numbing myself. In 1990, I got a big contract. I moved out. I physically moved me and my daughter out to Rancho Santa Fe, California. And I was going to run a big organization. And I was there 2 weeks before I got fired. I went out one night drinking with an employee, got drunk, blacked out, didn't realize what I had done. The word got back to the head of the board, and I got fired. In California at that time, a lot of AA meetings happened on the floor. So there were no chairs. I walk into this room, there's 30 people sitting around in a big circle. They all go around introducing themselves. Hey, I'm Sally, I'm an alcoholic. I'm Henry, I'm an alcoholic. They come to me, And I think, okay, this is my time to pontificate. So I say, this business of introducing yourself as an alcoholic is self-limiting behavior. Because I was Mr. Positivity and regurgitating Earl Nightingale and a bunch of other speakers at the time. I was a wannabe professional speaker. And everyone laughed and thought it was funny and whispered, keep coming back. And I had no idea what that meant, but I never went back. And my alcoholism really got progressive because alcoholism is a progressive disease. In February of 1996, there was a confluence of events that occurred where I had a major business failure. I had a marital failure. I had my daughter going through a crisis. And it all came together where finally I got to a place where the problems were bigger than me and I couldn't solve them. Every time I ran into a problem before then, I was able to solve it. I could muscle through it, I could persevere through it, I could figure it out, but I got to a place, I can't figure this out. I lost my house, I had this gorgeous home, I lost my wife, I lost my daughter, who was 13 at the time. I lost my self-esteem, I lost my self-respect. I lost the relationship with my immediate family, my extended family, my friends, my reputation. I lost everything. I did the logical thing for me at the time. I bought a gallon of vodka, and I was just gonna drown myself in it. It was a quasi-suicidal, I'm done. And somehow God sent an angel, my buddy David, and he drove down from Dallas to Austin, and he did an intervention. He said, Daniel, you've got to go into rehab. And I agreed, because I knew I was in trouble. So with a half a bottle of vodka in me, I drove, and I insisted to drive myself over to St. David's Pavilion. So I went to the hospital. David followed me. And I checked myself in, or tried to. And so during that process, they put you in the emergency room in a bay. And I was laying down on a gurney, drunk. And this poor kid next to me with a little curtain between us, and he had broken his arm. And it's 10 o'clock at night, and he is screaming at the top of his lungs. For 3 hours, they were checking his insurance like they were checking mine, and they couldn't get the insurances verified. So that young man is responsible for my sobriety. Because at 1 o'clock in the morning, I said, I had it. That's it. I'm leaving. I left the hospital. I got into my Jeep. There was one beer left in the Jeep. I popped the top. I took a sip. It was warm. I threw it out. I said, I'm going tomorrow to AA. And that's what happened. I walked into AA. It said, you have to be rigorously honest in order to recover. So I started getting honest. And the first person I got honest with was with God. I said, God, I can't do this. And I really came to a place, for the first time in my life, of full surrender. I stopped trying to be a big shot. I stopped trying to be that world's speaker, teacher, management guru. And I got a little tiny office in Austin, Texas, and hid out. I was ashamed of myself. I was ashamed of my behavior. And I was new in recovery for alcoholism. And I cut my fees in half. And I went from $150 an hour, which was a lot of money back then, to $75 an hour, and just saw people one-on-one. But something happened, and God really blessed that work. I didn't understand it, but I was happy about it. And Austin Ventures and a bunch of other venture capital firms discovered me, if you will, because I had a gift for helping CEOs and senior executives to grow and develop. I doubled my fee, and then I tripled my fee, I quadrupled my fee, and people kept on coming. I'm climbing the ladder to success, and that means I've got a high net worth, a beautiful home. I have books with my name on them, initials after my name. So I had 79 clients, back to back, every hour on the hour, 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 days a week. And you know, to take a vacation, it cost me $25,000 in lost fees. So I never took vacations, and it was like I was a prisoner in my office. When you're in that hamster wheel, you don't know. In fact, I remember Kevin coming into my offices for his coaching session, and Kevin comes in and says, "Daniel, are you a human doing or a human being?" And I was still a human doing. I was just doing. I was just still. Even, this is after Christ. This is after sobriety. This is after this decision to grow from the inside out, but I was still going. I was still going after that ladder of success, right? And still filling this God-shaped vacuum with success. You know, the whole Old Testament, we can sum up in just a few words. It's God giving us everything, the Garden of Eden, all of our needs met. But no, we want more. So it's filling the hole with more of something other than God. Whether it's our children that we're putting on the pedestal, that we worship our kids, or we worship our spouse, or we worship our job, or we worship our bank accounts, or our sport, or our hobby. Anything we put ahead of Christ is an idol. So it's that more that we have to watch out for, because there's nothing more that we need. So the question of who I am is really interesting. So I have the official answer. I'm a child of God. But who I am deep, I mean, if they really peel back the layers of the onion, I'm a broken vessel. Anything good that is produced in my life is of Christ. Anything produced of Daniel, not so much. So there's this constant war. We hear about that all the time from the Apostle Paul. He talks about, what a wretched man am I. And it's that constant fight. But if we're not doing the fight, if we're not aware that there is this opposing forces of Daniel's way and God's way, then it's easy just to run Daniel's way. We have to be constantly in surrender, constantly in this place of letting go of what we think we want, what we think we should do. Lord, it's not my money. It's yours. This is not my job, and they don't write my paycheck. You write my paycheck. It's not only a daily surrender, it's a moment-by-moment surrender. And at any moment of the day, we can take it back, and we do. That's sin. I remember a few months ago driving my car, And I was driving. I was weaving in and out of traffic. I have this hot little Beamer BMW sports car, and I'm weaving in and out of traffic, and I'm taking the turns at, a fairly high rate of speed, and I hear a whisper. Who's driving the car? I said, well, it's me. Why don't you let me drive? Okay. All of a sudden, I started using my turn signal. I started going the speed limit. And I'm sure everyone on the road was much happier. I know my father was happier. And I still hear that today, so it's this little inside joke we have. Who's driving? And then I say, well, God, I just want to drive around this one curve. I hit the gas and whoo, and then give it back to him. Surrender, I think, is absolutely foundational. If we don't fully surrender, Christ can't have his complete way with us. So he has part of his way, but he doesn't have the complete way. And so we're in his will, partially, but not completely. And so it drives us to continual prayer. Not just foxhole prayers, Lord, get me out of this, or Lord, help me, or not waiting reactively to the situation, but proactively, Lord, what do you want me doing today? How can I be of maximum service to you? Not because I have to, but because you love me so much, I want to. I'm mentoring with a pastor, Buddy Westbrook, who wrote the book Conversations with God, and he's taught me how to have these intimate conversations on a daily basis with God. And it's always better to discern God's will, not necessarily to decide what we're doing, but to discern, what does God want me to do? And when we're discerning correctly, and when we're following his plan and his will for our life, that's where there's joy, there's peace, and there's nothing to prove. I am wholly and completely loved by God, and there's nothing that I have to do to prove myself to God, to earn God's love. I don't have to lead one more person to Christ. I don't have to write one more book. I don't have to have one more client. I just have to have a relationship. But I have to have an intimate, deep, authentic, real relationship. And that relationship fills me completely. God gives us out of his abundance. He gives us unlimited grace, unlimited mercy, unlimited forgiveness. And he doesn't require us to do anything. But as a result of his love, we feel compelled to do things. We want to please our Heavenly Father. We want to serve. I wanted to do something material, not just give my money away to the church. I wanted to give my time. And I knew that I had this ability, God-given gift of helping leaders grow. Senior pastors are leaders. So I started giving my time away to pastors, and I started coaching them. And I found that the same leadership principles that we apply to leaders in corporate America apply to pastors. And so I just started coaching pastors and helping pastors to grow and develop. And so I just started giving back. And it was so rewarding. But it was pro bono, and I wanted to keep it that way. And because I just didn't want any money involved in the transaction. And that fast forward, it materialized into a 501c3, a nonprofit that we started 7 years ago, me and my wife. And now we have 120 pastors currently receiving coaching. We have 15 coaches, and we're heavily concentrated in Latin America. And it's just a joy. But that giving back and in an altruistic way with nothing expected in return is the biggest joy of my life. You know, there's a great scripture, Colossians 3:23 and 24, that really resonate a lot with me. It says, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for men, since you know you'll receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you're serving. So Christ is my employer. I'm here to serve. And so surrender is a major theme, but service is also a major theme. You know, Mark 10:45, for even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. So giving our lives over to the care of God and serving him, not out of a compulsion like we have to, not to pay him back, not to please him even, but simply out of the abundance of his love for us, his goodness, his grace. We just want to. No matter where we are in our journey, the story is not over. We still have that last breath to take. It's never too late for anyone. And as a friend of mine says, you got to come all the way in, and you got to sit all the way down, and you got to stay. So coming all the way into a relationship with Christ, sitting all the way down in the seat he's prepared for us, and staying in that relationship, moment by moment, day by day, that's the way.
It is so easy to get caught up in the world of trying to achieve success. Everyone's definition of success is a little bit different, but we all know what our idea of making it is. We are certain that if we can just get to that next place, then we'll feel truly satisfied and secure. But the truth is, those things never deliver on their promises. They're a carrot on a stick. We can sometimes deceive ourselves by thinking that we're fully following God's will, but have we completely surrendered the places of our hearts that only we know about? Those things we go back to for validation, for comfort, or identity? We're all in process, like Daniel said, and at any time we can take back the steering wheel of our lives. But we have a choice, moment by moment, to surrender. This sort of constant surrender to Jesus is what will truly deliver peace and fully satisfy us in the deepest places of our hearts.
There was a lot of feasting on the words of people. And there's a statement I heard that if you live off the praises of man, you'll die by their criticism. And so my life was really consumed by, what are people saying about me and what do they think about me?
Janessa Waite was like many of us in our teenage years, trying to figure out who we are, where we belong, and what sort of life we want to live. Janessa could adapt to live in two different worlds, and she fit in pretty well in both. But there was always this nagging question, who am I? We hope you'll tune in for our next episode called I'm a Daughter.
Hi, my name is Travis, and I'm from St. Louis. I love Story Partners because I believe stories are the most powerful way to connect with people. Story Partners is a nonprofit ministry that tells stories that point to Jesus. We tell these stories through short documentary films as well as this podcast. We're a crowdfunded ministry funded by monthly giving from people like me. To learn more or join our crowdfunding community, visit us at storypartners.org.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Story Partners podcast. This story was recorded and edited by Walt and Annie Manus. A special thanks to Matt Slavic, who helped with the edit on this episode. If you were encouraged by it, please share it with a friend. We'll see you next time.